Yeah, I wanted to thank everyone who is stayed to listen to my part. I guess since I'm sort of Mark Drakeford's opening act, I'm going to subject you to a PowerPoint. It's not ideal, but still. I'm going to take a few minutes to explain the Equal Power, Equal Voice program to you. First of all, I just wanted to thank the mentors and mentees who have made it along today and supported us over the last year. So, first of all, what is Equal Power, Equal Voice? It's an intersectional mentoring scheme between Disability Wales, Wen Wales, Stonewall Cymru and East. The aims are to increase diversity and representation in Welsh public life. When we say Welsh public life, that can be elected politicians, board members, charity CEOs, campaigners, media, personalities, all of those sort of things, just to make people more visible and more representative of society as we actually are. We're funded by the National Lottery and the Welsh Government, the National Lottery Community Fund and the Welsh Government. So I just wanted to emphasise again that it is between the four organisations, so it's a great joint scheme being run, covering all of those protected characteristics that these four charities do support and bringing them together into one scheme. It's based off really successful past schemes by both Wen and East, and it's the first year now into our second year where Stonewall and DW are taking part. So this is a bit about how we actually achieve what it is we're trying to do with EPEV. One-to-one mentoring is at the core of it, and there's a couple of people who have been mentors here today and have signed up to do it this year, and we're always really grateful that they do come forward and share their expertise and knowledge with people who aspire to get to the roles they're in. We offer training sessions on a broad range of things: politics, campaigning, public speaking, media, and how to apply for the sort of roles that are those decision-making positions in public life. We've had, over the last year, some great guest speakers. You've got an example up there of Glenys, who was one of our mentees last year, with her mentor, Helen Fachan, the Plaid Cymru MS. And the aim of all of this is to improve people's confidence, their understanding of how they can change the decisions that affect them, and to improve their networks so they are embedded in those decision-making power structures which disabled people and people from those other backgrounds the other charities represent have been excluded from historically. And I think this is the key point to make, that it is an intersectional scheme. We make sure everyone gets the same training and learns from each other's experiences. It's not just about making disabled people or BAME people or women represented. It's about making them more inclusive, better informed representatives so they can advocate for themselves, but also understand some of the barriers that affect the other groups involved. As I said, we've just completed our first year, so I'm going to run through some of the things that went really well last year. 23 out of the 26 DW mentees, there was over 100 in total across the four charities, completed the programme. 4 mentees, and I'll touch on this again in a second, were elected the first time of asking. Lots of people, and you'll see some of them come out, some of the great mentees we've had in the past, like Paul and Dee, who will speak after this, were both great and both had great successes out of this already. A load of training and trips to Westminster and the Senedd, and it was surprising, well, it shouldn't be surprising, just how many people had that access to Westminster, to the Senedd in the past, and how after just a year there were situations where we had Welsh Government ministers, shadow cabinet members, MPs, MSs from all parties, and they were getting roasted by these people who'd never had that opportunity and really wanting to know what they were going to do to change things. So you could see the confidence already coming through in people in a really meaningful way. And this is the sort of feedback that we got. 64% increase of people understanding what it took to be an effective representative. 65% what it meant to be an effective trustee or board member. 60% increase in people who understood how laws and policy is actually made about them. 95% of people felt more confident in the face of adversity, and 93% of people felt they could inspire those around them. Everyone understood why we were there and why that representation was important. And again, touch on that we got 4 people elected or re-elected. In the first election they could have stood in, and when you actually looked, only about 25% of people said that was their aspiration. So when you're talking 4 out of 25 at the first time of asking, it's not bad returns on that. All of this meant we won a Fancy Wales Online award. As you can see, I did not expect to win, so I forgot my suit jacket when I went up on stage. And now we're on to the second year. We've already recruited, we've already put people in. And what I really want to emphasize in the second year, we've learned what went well and what didn't in the first year. And it's more diverse this year than it was last year. 25 people will be DW's mentees. But there's 38 successful disabled applicants on the scheme, so that means that Stonewall, Wen, and East will have more disabled people in those groups. But it also means DW is going to have more BAME people, more LGBT plus people in our groups as well. So making clear the intersectionality, lots of people in this room will have those cross-cutting identities, and that's key to what we're trying to do here. And this is the part that's a bit more depressing about why it is really needed. It's a stat from just last week that when 33% of tenants in housing associations are disabled, only 8% are board members, and that's gone backwards over the last 6 years. In 2017, only 1.5% of council candidates were disabled. There's never been a wheelchair user in the Senedd in its 30-ish years of existence. Only 6% of the Sennedd's own staff are disabled. There's no data on how many MSs are disabled. 40% of disabled people live in poverty in Wales. DW's own surveys show that disabled people don't feel their rights are respected and they're not going to get better. And the increase in hate crime figures that came out last week. And you just can't help but feel if the more disabled people were making the decisions, that this wouldn't be what we would be seeing. And it's the same for the other groups as well. I think there's a quote from Jess Blair, the head of the ERS, that if this sort of trend continues, it's a glacial pace of change is what we're seeing. It's going to take till 2050 until we just reach the equality between men and women standing for local government elections in Wales. 1.8% of BAME people were 1.8% of council candidates were BAME people. 6% of the population of Wales are BAME. LGBTQ plus people are too afraid to come forward to stand because of the harassment and abuse that they face. And we're very far away from having an openly trans MS in the Senedd. I think, and while we can do schemes such as EPEV, such as the Access to Elected Office scheme, you need more to be done by the political parties, by the organisations which already hold those keys to power to bring in disabled people, BAME people, LGBT plus people, more women. This is all well and good standing disabled people in council seats, but they have to be winnable council seats with good support to make the difference and actually have people in those decision-making roles. But now I've been a bit miserable about it all. I'm going to touch on some of the more positive outcomes. Just a couple of the sort of testimonials that we got from Kitty, who felt that the scheme unlocked her ability that she already had there and her individual values and individual strengths to apply to what she wanted to achieve. And similarly, Roxana, appointed to a board before the scheme even finished with Coleg y Cymoedd, and puts a lot of the praise of that on the scheme and her mentor for helping her get that application, understanding what the process meant. So really, all I'm going to sort of finish on is make the point there's plenty of people in here that either have those skills already and can be the mentors and can share something. And again, I thank everyone who does come forward to do that, or might think that some of the stuff I've talked about, being on a board, being elected, being a better campaigner is what they want, then please apply next year. Partly because I want a job, but partly because it is something I think that we believe in. It goes really well with the Access to Elected Office scheme, and it's something that needs to change if we are to achieve the goals that everyone spoke about over the course of the day. Thank you, everyone. I'm supposed to introduce the next people. Is it Grace or Dee? Well, I'll welcome up one of the mentees, Dee, who, as I already said, did great things, and Grace, who was one of our mentors last year as well, who I think is joining us via Zoom.
Yes, I'm here by Zoom. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Sean, for that. And I'm delighted to be here. So I'm Grace Contock, and I am a public appointee and a therapist and writer, and I sit on boards across health and social care. I'm a mentor for and a graduate of an early version of Equal Power, Equal Voice, and it simply is life-changing. When I first discovered boards existed, I knew I wanted to contribute, but I didn't know how. My first interview for a health board had over 250 applicants, and people actually flew in to interview. I was the only person in the room who wasn't a former head of social services or a retired captain of industry, and or at least that's what it felt like then. I was also the only disabled person, or at least an visibly disabled person in the room, the only one under 30, and the one of only a handful of women. I didn't get that role, but I knew I needed support to understand the complex landscape and navigate it as a woman with multiple marginalized identities. So many public bodies seek corporate or financial sector or senior executive backgrounds in board recruitment. And beginning in public office, I was really aware of not having that background because structural and psycho-emotional disableism, it creates fragmented CVs and it can curtail career building. My CV as a disabled woman, and like that of many mentees, is non-traditional. And it's often not what public bodies have traditionally been looking for. That's why it's essential that there are programs like Equal Power, Equal Voice to equip us to be able to demonstrate and meet with value outside of traditional career paths and navigate public life. And this scheme is so needed. There are 1 in 5 people in the UK identify as disabled. This includes mental health issues, long-term conditions, and people with learning disabilities. But there are only a handful of disabled MPs in Parliament, and as Sean has outlined the details in the Senedd. And we are not representative, and representing voters in Parliament is just one job in public life. So public appointments, which is what I do, are not necessarily very well known, but they oversee vast sums of public money. Public bodies spend 200 billion a year. Everything from Arts Council to NHS boards to public appointees steer organisations, and they shape all our lives. And I'm going to reiterate some of what Sean has said. The number of disabled people in public roles has been decreasing year on year. In 2020, just 5.8% of new appointments were made to disabled people, down from 6% in 2019. In the most recent data, it's just a tiny amount of 5% of new public appointees report identifying as disabled. And there've also been big setbacks in representation of women returning to the level of 8 years ago. People of colour and BAME people have also got fewer appointments, only 9.6% appointed in 2021. So this means that our lives are being impacted by people who don't represent us, the people who they are there to serve. And many disabled people have not been in public life or not in public safely and accessibly and equitably at all. Disability hate crime is increasing and making communities less and less safe. So I'm not going into graphic detail on the numbers because I don't want to potentially cause distress, but I'm aware that all this comes as the cost of living soars. And we know that there is a disability pay gap. So disabled people earn 13% less than a non-disabled person with the same job, with equal qualifications and experience. The number rises to over 33% for autistic people, according to the Office of National Statistics. But there's also the extra costs associated with being disabled. Scope suggests that it costs an extra £583 on average a month. I would love to see that if that were updated, because I feel like there's a lot of expenses happening at the moment with the pandemic and with treatment being delayed by the pandemic. So what do we do about this? We know the picture, we know what's happening. How are we making a change? So joining the mentoring program public appointments can be life-changing. To the best of my knowledge, in some of my roles, I'm the youngest person holding that role in the UK. I'm often the first disabled person to hold the role, but I want equity to be the standard. This shouldn't be special or notable. It should be a baseline, and I'm not that young, so this shouldn't be something anybody's like particularly proud of, because I want it to be part of hope that we're moving towards a more just and equitable future. And supporting increasing equity is so essential in the organisations that are in power and are in structures and are running our lives. And if it wasn't for the training and support of Equal Power, Equal Voice, I know I wouldn't be able to do the roles that I do in the way that I do them. These times are incredibly tough, and with so many urgent issues to attend to, we can feel pulled in 1,000 different directions. We can feel hopeless and overwhelmed, and we don't know where to start. But I know that to tackle these issues, it's going to take all of us. And so I'm really proud to be working with this programme to make sure that all voices can be heard in the places where the decisions are being made, and we are at the table while our futures are being decided. We may not agree with all these structures, but for while they are in existence, it's urgent, and we have too little time to not be part of those conversations. And quite frankly, as disabled people in Wales, we have too much talent for that not to be included. And I was delighted to be part of mentoring a great part of that talent with my mentee Dee, who is also going to speak to you now. Thank you.
Prynhawn da pawb. I'd like to talk to you about imposter syndrome. When I first applied to the scheme, I didn't think I'd get accepted. There were others who were better, more qualified. Could I ever be in public life? I wasn't sure I could. I had a huge case of imposter syndrome. This came from many places. Growing up, we weren't allowed to sort of boast or see ourselves as being clever or good or talented at something. Every job I've had, I've been waiting for the tap on the shoulder of somebody coming and saying, we found you out, time to go. But also with my health. When you've experienced health inequality, it can make you question everything, even your own mind. It took me 23 years to get a diagnosis of endometriosis, and that was not for the lack of trying. I have lost count of how many doctors I have been to see. I even had 2 diagnostic surgeries and was told there was absolutely nothing wrong with me, except for IBS. I think every endometriosis patient in the world has been told that they have IBS at some stage. I eventually had to pay privately to see a specialist at a cost of thousands of pounds, which of course comes with huge privilege that I was in a position to do that. But the point is, no one should have to do that to get the care that they need and they deserve. My diagnostic delay caused me to develop further conditions. I could no longer work full-time, play sport, go on bike rides or socialise. Life as I knew it had been tipped on its head. I also had no idea that I was disabled. I knew I had multiple chronic conditions, but like so many in our community, I didn't realise I was allowed to call myself disabled. My conditions are all invisible, and so often I was told that I didn't look disabled, which is not the compliment that people think it is. I learned about the social model of disability, and like so many people here, it empowered me at a time I felt I'd lost so much. But on the road to rights, we must bring all of those with us who don't realise they're disabled or don't know about the social model and help them to understand their rights too. Disabled is not a dirty word, and the barriers that disable us simply should not exist in 2022. In 2021, I began to work for Fair Treatment for the Women of Wales, the charity that genuinely saved my life. My boss, the fantastic Debbie Schaffer, encouraged me to apply for Equal Power, Equal Voice, having been mentored herself. So I did. I was accepted onto the scheme. The wonderful Grace would be my mentor. Imposter syndrome again. I didn't think I was good enough to be matched with Grace. So I applied to go on a mentoring scheme, and I didn't think I was good enough to be mentored. Make that make sense, please. Following conversations with Grace about my goals, things switched. I wasn't sure I wanted to be an MS or a counsellor, But I like the idea of public advocacy through the media, through policy, and perhaps being on a board of a charity or a health board. Grace helped me realise my worth. And if not me, then who? At FTWW, we are passionate about co-production. The patient voice must be integral to every level of service design and development in healthcare and considered equal to clinicians and decision makers. We are experts by our experience, and together we can collaborate to get things right first time. I know that I have 23 years of lessons that can be learned about the missed opportunities to diagnose me and treat me, and on occasion the failure to even show me basic respect. So if not my voice, then whose? Since joining Equal Power, Equal Voice, I have met incredible mentees and mentors who are all doing fantastic things. I have co-written appendices for the Women's Health Wales Coalition, and that in turn successfully influenced Welsh Government to create a Women's Health Plan for Wales. I've been a media spokesperson for FTWW and even featured on a 30-minute episode of Walescast. I'm writing a book. I sit on Welsh Government task and finish groups and cross-party groups, as well as disability working groups. I've applied to be on the board of WCVA. And I'm here talking to you all today, and despite appearances, I'm absolutely terrified. So is imposter syndrome there now? I have a little confession to make. At our closing event at the Senedd earlier in the year, I asked every single person I met, mentee or mentor, project officer or Senedd member, I asked if they ever had imposter syndrome, and every single person said yes. To me, that showed that everyone experiences feeling scared, a lack of confidence, a worry that they might mess things up. But they feel the fear and they do it anyway. So I've decided I no longer have space in my life for imposter syndrome. Whenever it creeps in, I kindly ask it to leave. Well, most of the time it's kindly. So if not me, then who? Something Grace said to me during our sessions has stuck with me. I have written it out and look at it when things feel overwhelming or I think my goals are unachievable. She said, we can't change the world, but we can change our corner of it. So I'm delighted to be a mentor on the next round of Equal Power, Equal Voice, supporting Charlene with her goal to ensure that those who need them can comfortably access disabled toilets without fear of prejudice. I'm so pleased to be able to give something back and want to encourage more people to apply to this fantastic scheme. We can change our corners of the world. If not us, then who? Diolch yn fawr iawn.